Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. Thank you guys so much for joining me once again. So, I shared with you in the past that when I was 7 years old, we moved into this house, and the house was kind of creepy and it was kind of old. And in the basement of this house, they had a dirt floor section, and underneath what looked to be like two old bunk beds that were kind of built into the house itself, down in the basement, there was nothing in this whole house but this one book. And this is the book, Franz Barden's Initiation into Hermetics. And so at 7 years old, I tried to read this and I could not understand it for the life of me. It talked about different elements, it talked about elemental beings, it talked about Hermetic principles. But I kept at it, and I kept reading the book, even though I couldn't understand all the words. I couldn't really understand what it was. But I kept at it, and eventually I did make it through understanding it. And it's a book I've gone back to time and time again, and it's sitting on my shelf over here right now. And 45 years later, it was like this book was left for me. And it has sent me down this path of Hermeticism, Gnosticism, mysticism, Kabbalah, ancient ways, all those things. So we're going to talk about the 7 Hermetic principles for self-mastery, the teachings of Hermes Thoth. And here we see the 7 Hermetic principles, the laws of the universe according to the Kyballion. And so, in case you have never heard of Hermeticism or the Kybalion itself, and you might not have given much thought to what the Hermetic principles could possibly be, surprisingly, these ancient principles can be applied to anyone's life today. As it turns out, Hermeticism's ancient principles for self-mastery can be used by anyone who is looking to further their personal growth. And this is especially effective if you're already working with the law of attraction. And so this is out of the lawofattraction.com, and many people have heard of that. But when you look at these principles and you compare them to, say, Taoist philosophy, to, say, certain sects of Hinduism and other Eastern philosophies as well, you'll see that things really, really go together. And that's one of the reasons why I really drifted away from traditional, fundamental, or Orthodox Christianity. Because when you look at shamanism, when you look at Buddhism, when you look at Hinduism, when you look at things like the mystery school traditions, Hermeticism, these things that had to be underground in the West, you see that there's a lot of core truths. And in most cases, they are all in agreement, yet really very different from fundamentalist philosophy that comes out of the Judeo-Christian Abrahamic tradition. So, but then again, there are also mystery school traditions in both, obviously, Judaism and Christianity, as well as Islam. So there's always the mystical traditions, even though they might not have dominated like the fundamentalist viewpoints. And in my opinion, there's a strong reason for that, because these things, like the 7 Hermetic principles and understanding them, they're truly self-empowering. And when we see that, we know there's been forces that have not been about self-empowerment of the masses. So when we look at this and we're seeing what are these laws of the universe, well, what is Hermeticism as well? So Hermeticism is a tradition that dates back as far as the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, according to this. It actually goes back farther than that. You could clearly say 1st and 2nd centuries BC, but also the thoughts are the lineage goes all the way back to ancient Egypt. It goes all the way back to the time of Atlantis and has been maintained since then. So it's basically the teachings of the being that is known to us as Hermes, Mercury, and Thoth. It's thought that those are all the same being, or perhaps they're all a certain type of classification of being. Perhaps they're all members. Maybe they're members of a secret society. As we know, secret societies have dominated our world, and they dominate them to this day. Certain groups have revived Hermeticism, such as the Freemasons. We've talked about them as well. And we've talked about the philosophies that guide them. So, Hermes Trismegistus is viewed as the father of Hermeticism. He's also credited as the writer of Corpus Hermeticum, as well as the Emerald Tablet. Now, he isn't thought to have been any one individual, really. Rather, it's widely suspected he is a blend of a few distinct mythological figures, among them the Hellenistic god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth. That said, it's worth noting that some scholars do hold that he was a real person. And, if you read the Emerald Tablet, he'll tell you he's an Atlantean. He's from Atlantis. And so the teachings are most definitely ancient teachings, and most definitely, to me, they feel exactly true and real. So when we look at what is all about, so much of Hermeticism has been condensed into the Kybalion. The Kybalion is a book that was published by a mysterious individual or individuals named the Three Initiates. The book's name refers to the three planes of existence: the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. It's also linked to Hermes' mastery of these three domains. According to the Kyballion, 7 Hermetic principles should guide our understanding of the universe. Each chapter of the book is devoted to explaining and illustrating one of the principles. You can think of these principles as universal laws or doctrines. On first read, it can seem as though the Kybalion is based on fantasy and has little relevance for everyday scenarios or contemporary people. However, once you take the time to interpret and consider the core meaning of each principle, it becomes apparent that they have broad and powerful applicability. So, this is where that famous saying comes from, as above, so below. So, as noted above, in Hermetic traditions, the three planes of existence are the mental, physical, and spiritual. Hermeticism posits deep connections between all three of these planes and emphasizes that each is constantly influencing the others. This aspect of Hermetic philosophy is in harmony with what the law of attraction teaches us, namely that our thoughts, which are on the mental plane, can directly impact the world around us on the physical plane. Similarly, the emotional and spiritual world has very real ramifications for how our lives develop. Planes of existence are intimately related to vibrational frequency. Crucially, your environment, the physical plane, will shift its vibration so it's in tune with the mental vibration of your thoughts. Meanwhile, the mental plane's vibration is partially determined by your spiritual vibration. So, as the law of attraction tells us, increasing our spiritual vibration is the path to creating a better and more fulfilling material life. And here are the principles. The first one, the principle of mentalism. The all is mind. The universe is mental. And this was also basically what the philosophical scientists came up with, which was a think tank of many of the most brilliant minds of our times, many that were working on quantum physics back in the 20s and the 30s, along with Einstein, Max Planck, and the like. This is what they came up with. And so, these brilliant minds are in complete agreement with this ancient tradition. It's all mind. Everything is consciousness. That is the big foundation we have to understand. The all is mind. The universe is mental. Everything in the universe is mental. In a certain sense, the universe itself is a living mind. Yes, we are living in the mind of God. And I've shown before on so many different videos that when you look at the brain at a microcosmic level, it looks just like the neural pathways we see in the neural pathways in the brain looks like the stars in the sky, and it's all connected. So this Hermetic principle tells us that we are all one, and that our surroundings are an inherent part of us. Once you understand the truth of mentalism, you begin to grasp how it is that we are capable of shaping our reality just using our thoughts. Quantum physics shows that. Things don't take form until they are observed. So again, this points to the fact, and this also points to the fact, besides that we're living in the mind of God, we are living in a matrix of sorts as well, and we can manipulate the matrix. And the matrix has been manipulated by these forces that have tried to keep us in the dark and keep themselves in the light. But knowledge is spreading in this time. Another important lesson drawn from the principle of mentalism is that if we think the right thoughts, the right actions will follow. So this is a reminder that it's vital to plan carefully, to spend time reflecting your true passions and identifying your life's purpose. Once you have done so, your thoughts will be aligned with the universe in such a way as to create the reality you desire. So while there is an important place for intuition, as we'll see below, Hermetic teachings emphasize the power of reason and intelligence, causing us against impulsive choices. Number 2, principle of correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. As within, so without. As without, so within. At the heart of the principle of correspondence is the idea that there are constant links between the mental, physical, and spiritual planes. Consequently, if we want to understand the patterns we see in our lives, then we must look at all these aspects. Implicit in this principle is the acceptance that we cannot access all planes of existence. However, Hermetic practitioners tend to believe there is a keenly honed sense of a keenly honed sense of intuition can help us tap into aspects of higher and lower planes. Paying attention to gut feelings, such as seemingly unexplained pull towards a person or event, can help you make more sense of the links between your everyday experiences and the higher spiritual plane. The principle of correspondence is also linked to the idea of repeating patterns, small and large. It's a reminder to consider the repeating patterns, repeating themes in your own life, and to reflect on the interconnectedness and the interconnected nature of your mental, physical, and spiritual aspects. For example, low energy in your spiritual life can manifest in physical lethargy in your body. On the positive side, practicing daily gratitude rituals can rejuvenate your spiritual side and lead to noticeable improvements in your physical well-being. When you study royal yoga, Raja Yoga, that was one of the things that really, really hit me. And I started studying it when I was about 11. And it's that there is a connection between our physical well-being and our spirituality as well. Not that if we're sickly, we will not be in as high a spiritual plane, but it makes it more difficult. And that the physical body will reflect the vibrancy of the spiritual. So a lot of times, again, when we have illnesses, it's a call that we are not on the right path. We have something to learn. There's something most definitely to learn. I had a series of illnesses / bad events in my early 30s that changed my path entirely. And so while I had achieved some goals that were really just typical goals, buying a house, my parents never had a house, so I bought a house at 22, and quickly felt like, what was the point? I just felt so empty after achieving it, where I was working so hard to get that. And I had worked so hard since the time I was a kid, with all different types of jobs, constantly working since I was 11 or 12, just to save money to buy a car at first, have my freedom there, and then eventually to save and buy a house, which I did. And then I got all that, and then something was really lacking, and it really set me off on the spiritual path. And so these patterns we'll recognize in time. And so it set me off on the spiritual path, but at the same time, I wasn't doing enough to manifest my destiny and what I had come in to do in this life. I was still working 50, 60 hours a week for the man in corporate jobs. And so what happened was I ended up rupturing 2 discs, and then shortly thereafter, I got Lyme's disease, and it wasn't till I totally started to change everything, eventually even getting a divorce after 26 years of being with the same person, but it was a relationship in which I could not grow. And so there's these things that become realizations as we go further on. I realized that physically in my early 30s, like 30, 31, 32, with what I was going through and with the Lyme disease, I was not going to live very long. There was something that was majorly wrong. And it was I believe, my higher self kicking my butt to get me on that path where I'm going to live my life's purpose, which is this. It's about teaching people that you don't have to accept limiting thoughts. We have tremendous power within us. We can heal ourselves in so many ways, physically, mentally, spiritually. The alternative healthcare system that we find ourselves in now is really what we've had for thousands of years. When we talk about energy work, when we talk about herbs, when we talk about doing things like intermittent fasting in general, and eating as wholesome as possible, but also developing a practice that would include such spiritual pursuits that are also beneficial emotionally and physically, such as yoga, tai chi, QiGong, things along those lines. We are holistic beings, so we need to recognize that. And here again, it's reflected in every way. And so when we're vibrant spiritually, it'll help the body be vibrant physically as well as emotionally. And so we shouldn't accept things that are putting us down in so many ways. Self-limiting beliefs are such a horrible thing. They are just a box that keeps you from living up to your highest potential. So we have the first two. We have the principle of mentalism, principle of correspondence, and we have the principle of vibration. Nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything's always changing. And this is one of the things that's always driven me. If I'm not getting better today, if I'm not improving in some way, then I'm regressing. There really is no standing still. You're moving forward or you're moving backwards. It's one or the other. Everything is vibrating. Everything is vibration. So, to put things simply, all things carry their own unique energy on all planes of existence. In fact, even the smallest particles in the universe has a vibrational frequency that impacts on things around it. Crucially, this principle tells us that high energy things are magnetically drawn towards one another and are attuned to them on a basic level. Meanwhile, low energy particles gravitate towards other sources of low energy. So in order to have a happy, fulfilling life, you will benefit from aiming to become a source of high energy. It's this understanding of vibration that underlies the law of attraction idea that like attracts like. So there is some truth in fake it until you make it. Just have that thought, that positive thought. Hold on to the positive thought. Don't focus on the negative. Focus on the positive. Focus on the good. The principle of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles, and everything has a pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. So the Hermetic principle of polarity tells us that all things in our lives have an opposite and resulting contrast. And it's what gives part of our narrative's meaning. For example, without knowing what lack feels like, it's difficult to focus on and appreciate abundance. The polarity of life's experiences help us to avoid taking things for granted. The principle is often taken to mean that everything has a dual nature, so we all contain love and hate, positivity and negativity, sadness and joy. It's up to us to recognize these contrasts and reflect on what they mean to us. We should use our willpower to align ourselves with the pole that is more helpful in our given situation. So one way to use the principle of polarity in your everyday life is to prompt yourself to reflect on the contrasts that boost your vibration. For example, for every bad or difficult thing you go through, challenge yourself to remember at least one good thing. Then notice how your appreciation of the latter is made more potent by having faced previous challenges. In addition, realize that everything that doesn't work well for you helps to point you the way towards its opposite. which might be the thing that does work for you. And this is the yin and the yang. This is Taoism. And this is exactly, it goes along perfectly with, Taoist philosophy. The principle of rhythm, everything flows out and in, everything has its tides, all things rise and fall. One of the major things we can learn from the principle of rhythm is that everything is in constant motion. There's a pattern to the changes we experience. Everything goes through cycles that move from birth to death and then rebirth. This principle applies just as much to the Earth's seasons as it does our bodies as well. The core idea here can be illustrative with the image of a pendulum swinging back and forth as well. So this could help us with mindfulness practices as well. And just think of this in general. I was just to share with you guys, I have recommended to you guys before, if you're into health and fitness and wellness, want to understand more about intermittent fasting and building muscle and exercise, putting routines together, Thomas DeLauer is great. He's the best in the business. And, I was just watching a video on him about, in the old school, we used to think in terms as far as like weightlifting, bodybuilding. There was a period of building, and there's a period of letting go and breaking down. And say, if we apply it to, we're either adding muscle or we're getting rid of fat, and the thought that the two don't happen simultaneously. Well, it's cycles and microcycles. And so it even breaks down into each individual day. So when you're eating something that's promoting an insulin response, you're having a catabolic response, you're building. And then just the opposite, when we are fasting, we're actually breaking down and burning away. This whole principle of rhythm is just, it's part of everything. It's part of everything, biorhythms. We go through different cycles. Women go through their monthly cycle, and so do men. It's part of our chemistry. It's part of the ebb and flow of everything that is. There is a season for everything. We could basically look at it as that. The principle of cause and effect. Every cause has an effect. Every effect has its cause. So sometimes it's called the principle of causality. The principle of cause and effect describes the way in which all actions and experiences relate to other events. We could even look at it as karmic, because karma itself is basically cause and effect related. In other words, every action instigates a reaction, and nothing should be viewed in isolation. It's a constant ebb and flow. And again, this gets into the rhythm, into the cycles, the changing of vibrations, the changing of frequencies. Hermeticism often encourages people to become more active agents in their life. Essentially, you become the cause more than the effect. Decide what you want to do and be. Plan out the precise steps you need to take to attain those goals. So this principle also prompts you to think about the far-reaching impacts of your choices. Plus, it encourages you to address the things that are influencing you for good or for ill. For example, when you apply the principle of causality in your manifestation work, you can use it to understand the ways in which the spiritual dimensions of your life can directly influence your surroundings, as well as other people. So, be very aware of that. And then we have the principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. And again, this is the Tao, and this is that duality. Now, underlying it and behind it, we have the unity. But in this realm, in this 3D realm of existence, most definitely we see the masculine, the feminine, the positive, the negative. And so this is the last of the 7 Hermetic principles. The principle of gender tells us that the masculine and the feminine can be found in everything, not just in people, but in all aspects of the mental, physical, and spiritual plane. However, it's important to note it isn't necessary to believe in gender stereotypes or to believe in perspective views about gender roles in order to make use of the concepts. And this principle has less to do with biological sex than it has to do with the notion of different masculine and feminine energies. And so in general terms, the former is thought to be assertive, exploratory, and transformative. Meanwhile, the latter is reflective, protective, and nourishing. We are at our best when we learn how to draw on both energies in an appropriate way. Followers of Hermetic philosophy typically hold that we are made up of a blend of these energies. The principle of gender can be taken as an inspiration for us to find ways to apply and balance our masculine and feminine aspects, and excess of either can lower our vibrational frequency. For example, too much masculine energy can bring on recklessness and loss of perspective. On the other hand, too much feminine can be correlated with inaction. So there we have the 7 principles, and here we have the PDF of the Kybalion itself. And so I encourage you guys to read it. It's really a quick read. It doesn't really take too long. And then again, this is a good one to read through, and then maybe go back and just read one chapter at a time and let it sit, meditate on it, and reflect on it. Because it most definitely can change your life if it's the first time you're being exposed to these ideas. So, my friends, as always, I want to thank you guys for your support. Thank you for your support on Patreon, on Ko-Fi. Come join our family for as little as $1 a month. You could support the family and keep the channel going and growing. And also subscribe to both channels, Evolutionary Energy Arts as well as EEARTS. And make sure to click the bell on both to get notifications. So, my friends, I look forward to your comments. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being part of our family. As always, my friends, namaste and God bless.